Hi, I'm Emma. For 8 years, I sent half my paycheck to my parents every month. I covered their mortgage, paid off their debts, even funded my brother's college tuition. Then I lost my job in the tech crash. When I called my parents, desperate and scared, my father laughed and said, "Sounds like a you problem." That was the moment I realized I was nothing but a walking ATM to them. So when they lost everything in the market crash, I watched from a distance as their calls piled up. 67 missed calls in 2 days. But it was already too late. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember sitting in that sterile conference room. The walls were that particular shade of gray that companies choose when they want to appear modern but not intimidating. The HR director sat across from me, a folder placed precisely in the center of the table, her hands folded on top of it like she was protecting something fragile. "Emma, I'm afraid we have to let you go," she said, not meeting my eyes. "The company is downsizing due to market conditions. Your entire department is being eliminated." I nodded mechanically, my mind already racing through calculations. Rent due in 2 weeks. Car payment the week after. My parents' mortgage payment that I'd been covering for years. My brother Nate's tuition installment coming up. Your severance package includes 8 weeks of pay and benefits through the end of the month, she continued, sliding the folder toward me. "I'm sorry, Emma. You've been a valuable member of the team." Valuable. The word hung in the air like smoke. I'd been with Meridian Tech for 6 years, climbing from junior developer to team lead. I'd skipped vacations, worked weekends, delivered projects ahead of schedule. And now I was disposable, reduced to a line item someone needed to cut. I cleared my throat. "When is my last day?" "Today," she said softly. "IT will meet you at your desk to collect your equipment." I walked out of the building 40 minutes later, carrying a small box of personal items. My desk plant, a few framed photos, a coffee mug with a faded quote about success. The security guard nodded sympathetically as I passed through the lobby. I'd always greeted him by name each morning. Now I couldn't even remember what it was. The drive home felt surreal. San Francisco traffic moved around me in its usual frantic dance, but I felt disconnected from it all, like I was watching myself from somewhere else. My apartment was quiet when I arrived, sunlight streaming through the windows I usually only saw on weekends. I set the box down on my kitchen counter and stared at my phone. I needed to call my parents. They were expecting the usual transfer. In 3 days, $2,400 for their mortgage and utilities. They'd grown to rely on it, to expect it. After my father's early retirement 5 years ago and my mother's decision to quit her teaching job to focus on her health, I'd stepped in. Temporarily, we all said. Just until they got back on their feet. 5 years later, I was still supporting them, plus helping with my younger brother's education. Every month, like clockwork. My fingers hovered over my father's contact. Robert Winters. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. "Emma." Just the person I wanted to talk to, my father's booming voice filled my kitchen. "Your mother and I were thinking about finally renovating the deck. The Hendersons next door just put in this gorgeous teak setup. Probably cost them a fortune, but Sheila says we could do something similar for about 15 grand. What do you think?" I sat down heavily on my bar stool. "Dad, I just lost my job." There was a pause, so brief I almost missed it. Then a laugh, short and dismissive. "Oh, come on now. With your skills? You'll have another one by the end of the week." It's not that simple. The tech sector is in free fall. Companies are laying off thousands, Emma, he interrupted, his voice taking on that tone he used when he thought I was being dramatic. "You've always been our rock. The responsible one. This is just a minor setback." I closed my eyes. "Dad, I'm calling because I won't be able to send money this month. I need to conserve my savings until I find something new." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had cooled significantly. "Well, that puts us in quite a position. Your mother's medication isn't covered by insurance, and you know the mortgage is due on the 1st. "I know, Dad. I've been paying it for 5 years. "So what are we supposed to do?" "We're on a fixed income." The fixed income of 2 healthy adults in their early 60s who had chosen to stop working. I bit back the words. "Maybe you could reach out to Uncle Steve about a loan," I suggested. "Or consider downsizing. The house is really too big for just the 2 of you now." He scoffed. "Downsizing? At our age? And borrow from your mother's brother? That's your solution?" "Dad, I literally just lost my job. Today. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to keep my own lights on." Preparing and narrating this story. Took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His voice went cold. Sounds like a you problem, Emma. We raised you, put you through college. We invested in you. And now when we need you most, you're bailing on us. My hand tightened around the phone. I'm not bailing. I'm unemployed. Everyone hits rough patches. Your mother and I supported you your whole life. This is when family steps up. I could hear my mother in the background, asking what was wrong. My father's muffled explanation, making it sound like I was willfully abandoning them. Emma, my mother came on the line, her voice carrying that mixture of disappointment and guilt that I'd grown up swimming in. Surely you have savings? Emergency funds? You're always so good with money. I do have savings, Mom. But I don't know how long I'll be out of work. I need to be careful. Well, what about our needs? Your father's blood pressure medication isn't cheap, you know. I closed my eyes, fighting the familiar wave of guilt. I know, Mom. But, I suppose we'll just have to figure it out ourselves, she said, sighing heavily. Though I don't know how we'll manage the mortgage. We might lose the house. The house they could have sold years ago to buy something smaller and more manageable. The house that sat on land that had tripled in value since they bought it 30 years ago. I'm sorry, I said, the words automatic, programmed into me since childhood. You've always been so reliable, Emma, my mother continued, her voice wavering. Just enough. We just never thought you'd let us down like this. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my kitchen, my untouched box of belongings still on the counter. My parents had always seen me as the responsible one, the reliable one. The one who would sacrifice so they wouldn't have to. And for years, I'd accepted that role, wearing it like a badge of honor. But as I scrolled through my bank statements, a different story emerged. In the last year alone, I'd sent them over $28,000. Money that could have been my down payment on a condo. Money that could have been my own safety net. I'd been living in a one-bedroom apartment while they maintained a 4-bedroom house with a pool they rarely used. I drove a 10-year-old Honda while my mother complained about their aging 3-year-old Lexus. For the first time, I allowed myself to really see the pattern. It wasn't temporary help anymore. It was an expectation. A requirement. And now that I couldn't fulfill it, I wasn't their daughter, I was a disappointment. I slept poorly. That night, my dreams filled with falling and failing and faceless people shaking their heads at me. When morning came, I made coffee and opened my laptop, determined to start my job search immediately. I updated my resume, reached out to contacts, and set up alerts on all the major job boards. By noon, I'd applied to 7 positions and had reached out to 15 former colleagues who might know of openings. No one had responded yet, but it was still early. I tried to ignore the gnawing anxiety in my stomach. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother Nate. What's this about you not helping Mom and Dad anymore? They're freaking out. I stared at the message. Of course they'd immediately called him. Triangulation was a family specialty. I lost my job yesterday, I typed back. I told them I need to pause financial help until I'm employed again. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, that sucks about your job. But they're saying they'll lose the house. They have options, I replied. They could sell, downsize, get part-time work. Dad's only 63. Another long pause. You know how they are. They're not built for change. I almost laughed. Not built for change, but perfectly constructed to adapt to receiving thousands of dollars from their daughter each month. I don't have a choice, Nate. I'm unemployed. I get it, he wrote back. But I can't help them either. I'm still in school. School that I was helping pay for. The irony wasn't lost on me. Maybe it's time they help themselves, I replied, then set my phone down. It buzzed again almost immediately. A call from my father. I let it go to voicemail. The next day followed a similar pattern. Job applications in the morning. Texts and calls from my parents throughout the day, escalating in urgency and guilt. By evening, my mother had called 6 times, leaving increasingly tearful messages. Emma, please call us back. We don't know what we're going to do. Your father is so stressed his blood pressure is through the roof. Emma, the mortgage company called. We're going to be late on our payment for the first time ever. This will ruin our credit. Emma, I don't think you understand the severity of the situation. We could be homeless. That last one nearly broke me. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over the call button. Then I remembered my father's words, sounds like a you problem. I set the phone down and walked to my tiny balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the skyline in shades of pink and gold. From this height, the world looked peaceful, orderly. Cars moved along prescribed paths, people walked purposefully along sidewalks, everything in its place. For so long, I'd been in my assigned place too. The responsible daughter. The family bank. The one who would sacrifice so others wouldn't have to. But what if I stepped out of that role? What if, just this once, I put myself first? The thought felt foreign, almost wrong, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit. But as I stood there watching the city lights blink on one by one, something shifted inside me. A small voice that had been silenced for years finally spoke up. You deserve to take care of yourself too. Over the next week, my job search intensified as did the pressure from my family. My father's tone grew colder, more accusatory. My mother's messages became more desperate. My brother started to distance himself, clearly not wanting to be caught in the middle. 10 days after losing my job, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Emma, this is Aunt Carol. Your parents told me about your situation. I just want you to know that family is everything. When times get tough, we need to pull together, not apart. Please reconsider your decision. I hadn't spoken to my mother's sister in years. She lived in Florida and had never been particularly close to me. But apparently, she was now part of the campaign to bring me back in line. Another text followed from my uncle. Then a family friend. Then my mother's college roommate whom I'd met exactly twice in my life. My parents were mobilizing everyone. They knew, painting me as the villain who had abandoned them in their hour of need. The narrative carefully excluded the years of support I'd provided or the fact that I was currently unemployed. It was Nate who finally told me what was really happening. Mom and Dad have been telling everyone you cut them off because you're angry they wouldn't co-sign a loan for you to buy a vacation property, he said when I finally answered one of his calls. They're saying you're punishing them because they finally set a boundary. I sat down hard on my couch. That's completely fabricated. I've never asked them to co-sign anything in my life. And I certainly can't afford a vacation property. Nate sighed. I know. But that's what they're telling everyone. They even started a fundraiser online. Help us save our home after our daughter abandoned us. My hands shook as I opened my laptop and searched for the fundraiser. There it was, complete with a photo of my parents standing sadly in front of their house. The description was a masterclass in manipulation. After supporting our daughter through college and helping her establish her career, we are heartbroken that she has decided to cut us off financially in our time of need. We are in danger of losing our family home of 30 years. Any help would be deeply appreciated as we navigate this difficult time. They had already raised $7,200. I closed my laptop and walked to the bathroom, barely making it before I threw up. When I was done, I sat on the cool tile floor, back against the bathtub, and let the tears come. Not sad tears, angry ones. Hot and cleansing, they washed away the last of my guilt. My whole adult life had been shaped around being the person my parents needed me to be. The reliable one. The successful one. The one who would sacrifice. Without complaint. And in return, they had fabricated a cruel lie at the first moment I couldn't support them. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, creating 2 columns. In the left column, I listed every penny I had sent my parents over the past 8 years. Mortgage payments, property taxes, utilities, car payments, medical bills, home repairs, vacations they said they deserved, gifts for their friends, my brother's tuition. The total made me dizzy. $246,782. In the right column, I wrote down what I had received in return. Birthday calls. Christmas gifts that rarely reflected my interests. Occasional praise when I received promotions or raises, praise that quickly turned to expectations of increased financial support. And now, lies. Public humiliation. Emotional manipulation. By morning, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was freedom. I made a fresh pot of coffee, opened my laptop, and began to type an email to every person who had contacted me about my parents' situation. I attached bank statements showing years of transfers to my parents. I explained, simply and without emotion, that I had lost my job and needed to temporarily suspend financial assistance that had been ongoing for 8 years and totaled nearly $250,000. I didn't vilify my parents. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. I concluded, I love my family, but I need to prioritize my own financial security right now. I hope you can understand that this isn't abandonment, it's survival. I hesitated before hitting send, my finger hovering over the mouse. This would change everything. There would be no going back to the way things were. I clicked send. Then I picked up my phone and blocked my parents' numbers. I blocked their emails. I set all their social media accounts to mute. I created a quiet space around myself, a buffer against the storm I knew would come. 3 days later, I received a job offer. Not the dream position I'd hoped for, but a solid role with decent pay. Less than I'd been making before, but enough to cover my expenses. I accepted immediately. That same day, a knock came at my door. I hadn't been expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, my heart stuttered. My mother stood in the hallway, looking smaller than I remembered. Her hair was perfectly styled as always, her clothes immaculate. But there was something different about her posture, a tension I recognized from childhood, the tension that appeared whenever things weren't going according to her plan. I considered not answering. Then I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Emma," she said, her voice carefully modulated to show hurt but not anger. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, allowing her into my apartment. She looked around with thinly veiled disapproval. My place was small but neat, decorated in simple, modern furniture. Nothing like the cluttered opulence of my parents' home. "You've been avoiding our calls," she said, standing awkwardly in the center of my living room, refusing my gesture toward the couch. "I needed space," I replied. "Space?" She gave a short, humorless laugh. "While we lose our home? While your father's health deteriorates from stress? That's quite a luxury." I met her gaze steadily. "I lost my job, Mom. I told you that. And you got another one. Your cousin Jennifer saw you update your LinkedIn profile. Congratulations, by the way. You didn't think to share that news with your own parents?" "I just accepted the offer today." She nodded briskly. "Well, that's fortunate timing. The mortgage company has given us until the end of the week before they begin foreclosure proceedings." And there it was. Not, "How are you doing?" Not, "I'm sorry for what you've been through." Just the financial demand, thinly veiled as information. "I can't help with the mortgage anymore, Mom." She blinked rapidly, as if I'd slapped her. "Cannot or will not?" "Both," I said quietly. "My new position pays less than my previous one. And I need to rebuild my emergency fund." "I see." Her voice went cold. "So all those years of us supporting you, raising you, giving you everything. That means nothing now?" "It means everything," I replied. "You gave me life. You raised me. And I've spent the last 8 years trying to repay that by sending you over $200,000. Her cheeks flushed. "So you've been keeping score?" "No, Mom. I've been keeping afloat. Just barely." She crossed her arms. "What do you expect us to do? We're too old to start over. Dad is 63. You're 61. Millions of people your age work full-time." "We're not millions of people," she snapped. "We're your parents." I took a deep breath. "Yes, you are. And I love you. But I can't set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore." "Such drama," she muttered. "It's just money. If it's just money, then it shouldn't be such a problem for you to figure out another way to get it." She stared at me, shock written across her features. I had never spoken to her this way before. I had never stood my ground. "Your father was right," she said finally. "You've changed." "Yes," I agreed. "I have." She gathered her purse, her movements stiff with anger and injured pride. At the door, she turned back. "When you come to your senses, you know where to find us. If we still have a home, that is." After she left, I sat on my couch, expecting to feel guilt or grief. Instead, I felt oddly peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a boundary with my parents and held it, despite the pressure and manipulation. The next morning, I woke to an email from my father. The subject line read simply, "Your decision." I opened it with trepidation. "Emma, your mother told me about your conversation. I want you to understand the consequences of your actions. We raised you with every advantage, sacrificed our own dreams so you could pursue yours. And this is how you repay us. We will lose our home because of your selfishness. Your mother is devastated. Her garden, her memories, everything will be gone. I hope you can live with that knowledge. If you reconsider, let us know immediately. Otherwise, do not contact us." Again. "Dad," I read it twice, searching for any acknowledgement of my situation, any recognition that I had supported them for years, any concern for my well-being after losing my job. There was none. I closed the email without replying and got ready for my first day at my new job. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of stress and liberation. I threw myself into learning my new role, determined to establish myself quickly. The pay was indeed less than my previous position, but without the drain of supporting my parents, I found I could actually save a modest amount each month. I heard through Nate that our parents had been forced to sell their house, taking a slightly below-market offer to expedite the process. They'd moved into a 2-bedroom condo in a 55-plus community, a significant downsize from their 4-bedroom house with the pool and expansive yard. "They're telling everyone it's temporary," Nate said during one of our occasional calls. "Until they get back on their feet." I recognized the phrase. It was the same one they'd used when I first started helping them financially. Nothing was ever permanent with my parents, except the expectation that I would bail them out. How are they affording the condo? I asked. Nate hesitated. They had more savings than they let on. Plus the equity from the house sale. They're not destitute, Emma. They're just not living the lifestyle they've become accustomed to. I nodded, unsurprised. My parents had always been strategic with information, especially financial information. They shared what served their narrative and concealed the rest. Are they working? I asked. Dad picked up some consulting work with his old firm. Just part-time. Mom's talking about tutoring. So they could work. They had chosen not to for years because it was easier to rely on me. How are you doing? Nate asked, changing the subject. You seem different. I considered the question. In the 2 months since I'd lost my job and set boundaries with our parents, I had indeed changed. I'd moved from a place of constant anxiety, always worrying about earning enough, saving enough, giving enough, to something approaching peace. I was living within my means for the first time in years, making choices based on my needs rather than my parents' expectations. I'm doing well, I said finally. Better than I expected. Nate was quiet for a moment. They really did a number on you, didn't they? On both of us. Making us feel like we owed them for raising us. It was the first time he'd acknowledged the dynamic so directly. Yes, I said simply. They did. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, he said. Or stand up for you when they started telling everyone you'd abandoned them. You were caught in the middle. I understand. He sighed. Still. You were paying for my tuition too. I never properly thanked you for that. You're welcome, I said, throat suddenly tight. You're a good brother, Nate. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, thinking about family and obligation and the stories we tell ourselves. For so long, I'd believed I was helping my parents out of love and duty. But there had been fear there too, fear of disapproval, of being labeled selfish or ungrateful. Breaking free of that fear had been painful but necessary. And while the relationship with my parents might never be the same, I was beginning to see that as a good thing. The old relationship had been built on an unhealthy foundation. If we were ever to have a healthy connection, it would need to be constructed anew, with boundaries and mutual respect. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Emma, it's Dad. This is my new work phone. We need to talk. Markets crashing. Investments down 40%. Condo Association just announced a special assessment. $15,000 due next month. We don't have it. Please call. I stared at my father's text message, the familiar rush of anxiety flooding back. A special assessment for $15,000. The stock market crashing. The implicit demand for help wrapped in crisis language, it was a pattern I knew all too well. My thumb hovered over the message. Part of me, the part that had been conditioned for decades to respond to their emergencies, wanted to call immediately. But another part, the part that had been slowly growing stronger these past months, held back. I set the phone down and walked to my kitchen. Made a cup of tea. Watched the steam rise in lazy curls. Only when my hands were steady did I pick up the phone again. Instead of calling, I typed a response. I'm sorry to hear that. Have you spoken with the condo board about a payment plan? 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, they don't do payment plans. This is serious, Emma. We could lose the condo too. I took a deep breath. Have you looked into a home equity loan? Or selling some assets? Don't you think we've tried everything? This is an emergency. Family helps family in emergencies. There it was again. The declaration that defined our relationship. Family helps family, but only in one direction. I can't send $15,000, Dad. I don't have it. A long pause followed. Then, what about a loan? You have good credit. He wanted me to go into debt to solve their problem. To literally mortgage my future for their present needs. In the past, I might have considered it. Now, the suggestion made my skin crawl. No, Dad. I won't take out a loan. His response was immediate and cutting. I guess we know where we stand with you now. I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. That night, I pulled out an old photo album, one of the few sentimental items I'd kept through multiple moves. It contained snapshots from my childhood, carefully organized and labeled by my mother in her neat handwriting. I flipped through the pages slowly. Birthday parties where I smiled dutifully for the camera in dresses I hadn't chosen. School events where my parents beamed proudly at my achievements. Family vacations where we all looked happy, a perfect family portrait. But looking at them now, with adult eyes, I noticed things I hadn't seen before. The slight tension in my shoulders in every photo. The way my smile rarely reached my eyes. The distance between me and my parents, subtle but present. Even when we stood side by side. I paused at a photo taken on my college graduation day. I stood between my parents, my father's hand gripping my shoulder tightly, my mother's arm around my waist. Their smiles were wide and genuine. Mine looked strained. That was the day my father had first brought up paying them back for my education. "Now that you'll be making real money," he'd said as we walked to the car after the ceremony, "it's time to start thinking about helping your mother and me. We've invested so much in you." I just nodded, the weight of my new degree suddenly feeling like a burden rather than an achievement. I hadn't understood then that the investment my father spoke of came with compounding interest he expected me to pay for the rest of my life. I closed the album and returned it to the shelf. Those memories couldn't be changed, but my future was still unwritten. The next morning, I woke to an email from Nate. The subject line made my heart sink. "FYI, they're telling everyone you're ignoring their medical emergency." With a sense of dread, I opened the message. "Emma, just so you know, Mom and Dad are now telling family and friends that Dad had a minor heart incident and they needed the $15,000 for medical bills, not a condo assessment. They're saying you've refused to help with life-saving treatment. It's complete BS, but I thought you should know what they're saying." I closed my eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. The lies were escalating, becoming more dramatic, more calculated to paint me as a monster. I opened my laptop and navigated to Facebook. Though I rarely used it, I knew it was my parents' preferred platform for their carefully curated life narrative. Sure enough, there was a post from my mother, already with dozens of sympathetic comments. "Difficult times in the Winters household. Robert recovering from a cardiac event, and medical bills piling up. Amazing how you discover who truly cares when health crises strike. Grateful for friends who have offered support when family has turned away. Hashtag counting blessings, hashtag family first." The comments were a mixture of well wishes for my father's health and thinly veiled condemnations of me, not by name, but obvious in context. Family should always come first. Shame on those who don't understand that. Some people only think of themselves. Sending prayers for Robert. Let me know if you need anything. Real family sticks together. I felt a surge of anger, hot and clarifying. This manipulation had gone beyond trying to extract money from me. They were now actively trying to destroy my reputation and relationships with extended family and friends. I started typing a response, fingers flying across the keyboard, ready to expose their lies. But halfway through, I stopped. Deleted everything. Took a deep breath. Engaging directly would only fuel the drama. My parents were expert manipulators. With decades of experience. They would twist any public response I made, use it as evidence of my instability or cruelty. Instead, I opened my email and composed a message to my Aunt Linda, my father's sister and the only family member who had occasionally questioned my parents' narrative. "Dear Aunt Linda, I hope this email finds you well. I'm writing because I understand there are concerns about Dad's health circulating within the family. While I want to respect his privacy, I feel I need to clarify some things since my name is being mentioned. Dad contacted me recently about a $15,000 special assessment from their condo association. There was no mention of any health issues. If his health situation has changed, I'm deeply concerned and would appreciate accurate information. I care deeply about both my parents, but our relationship has become complicated by financial matters. For 8 years, I provided substantial financial support to them, support that I can no longer offer since losing my job earlier this year. I'm sharing this not to damage their reputation but because I value our family relationship and want you to have accurate information. With love, Emma." I attached bank statements showing years of transfers to my parents, then hit send before I could second-guess myself. Within an hour, my phone rang. Aunt Linda's name flashed on the screen. "Emma," she said when I answered, her voice gentle but firm. "Thank you for your email. I had a feeling things weren't quite as they were being presented." Relief washed over me. "You believe me?" "Of course I do. Your father has always had a creative relationship with the truth when it comes to money. Your grandfather dealt with similar issues with him. This was news to me." "What do you mean?" She sighed. "Your father borrowed money from your grandfather for years, always. With dramatic reasons why he needed it. When your grandfather finally said no, your father cut him off. Barely spoke to him the last 5 years of his life." I sat down hard on my couch. "I never knew that. They worked very hard to control the narrative," Aunt Linda said. "Just as they're doing now. But not everyone is fooled, Emma. Some of us see the pattern." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you for telling me this. I should have told you years ago," she said, regret coloring her voice. "I saw how they were leaning on you financially, but I didn't want to interfere. That was my mistake." After we hung up, I felt lighter somehow. Knowing that others could see through my parents' manipulation helped ease the isolation I'd been feeling. The next day, I received another email from my father. This one was from his personal account, not his work phone. The subject line read simply, "Your mother is heartbroken." I opened it with trepidation. "Emma, I don't know what you told Linda, but she's now refusing to help us with the assessment fee. Your mother is devastated that you would spread lies about us to family. Your behavior is destroying this family. If you want to repair the damage you've done, you know what needs to happen." Dad, no mention of his supposed cardiac event. No acknowledgement of the lies they'd been spreading. Just anger that I had disrupted their narrative and dried up another potential source of funds. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked his email address and returned to my work project, channeling my emotions into productivity. That evening, I met a friend for dinner at a small Thai restaurant near my apartment. Maya and I had been friends since college, though we'd drifted somewhat in recent years as my time and energy had been increasingly consumed by my parents' needs. "You seem different," she said, studying me over her pad thai. "More present somehow." I smiled. "I feel different. It's been a challenging few months, but also clarifying." I told her everything: the years of financial support, losing my job, my parents' reaction, the lies they were now spreading. It felt good to speak the truth aloud to someone who knew me, really knew me. "I always wondered why you worked so hard but never seemed to get ahead," Maya said when I finished. "You were carrying them this whole time." I nodded. I didn't see it clearly until recently. How one-sided it was. "And now?" "Now I'm learning to put myself first. It feels selfish sometimes, but also necessary." Maya reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It's not selfish to have boundaries, Emma. It's healthy." After dinner, walking back to my apartment. In the cool evening air, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The situation with my parents wasn't resolved, might never be truly resolved, but I was no longer carrying the weight of their expectations and demands. For the first time in my adult life, I was making choices based on my own well-being, rather than their needs. It wasn't easy, and the guilt still surfaced occasionally, but each day it grew a little lighter. A week later, I received a job offer from a startup that had been courting me. The position came with a significant salary increase and equity options. After careful consideration and negotiation, I accepted. I celebrated by taking myself out to a nice dinner, something I would never have done in the past. The old Emma would have immediately calculated how much of the raise could go to her parents. The new Emma ordered champagne and made plans for her future, a future that included retirement savings, travel, perhaps eventually a down payment on a home of her own. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. Nate's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," I answered, smiling. My relationship with my brother had been strengthening as we both set healthier boundaries with our parents. "Emma," his voice was tight, controlled. "Dad's in the hospital." My heart dropped. "What happened?" "He collapsed at the condo. They think it might have been a minor stroke or TIA. He's stable, but they're keeping him for observation." I sat down on the edge of my bed, mind racing. "Is it serious?" "The doctors say he should recover fully, but it was scary." "Mom's a mess." "I'll come," I said automatically, then hesitated. "Wait, is this real, Nate? Or is it another manipulation?" The question hung in the air between us. A few months ago, I would never have asked it. But now. "It's real," Nate said quietly. "I'm at the hospital now. I've seen the doctors myself." "Okay," I said, relief and worry mingling. "I'll be there first thing tomorrow." "There's something else you should know," Nate added, his voice careful. "They're still telling everyone you abandoned them when they needed medical funds. That narrative is all over the hospital waiting room right now. Mom's got the church group here, and they're all talking about it." I closed my eyes, a familiar knot forming in my stomach. "Thanks for the warning. What will you do?" It was a good question. The old Emma would have arrived apologetic, accepting blame she didn't deserve, desperate to make peace at any cost. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I'll be there for Dad," I said finally. "But I won't accept false accusations or manipulation. If that becomes the focus, I'll leave." "Fair enough," Nate said. "For what it's worth, I've got your back." The next morning, I drove to the hospital, hands tight on the steering wheel. I'd slept poorly, my dreams filled with arguments and accusations. But in the light of day, my resolve was firm. I would show up for my father because it was the right thing to do. But I would not surrender the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. The hospital corridor seemed to stretch endlessly as I walked toward my father's room. Outside the door, my mother sat with two women from her church group. When she saw me, her expression flickered between surprise and calculation. "Emma," she said, standing. "You came." "Of course I came," I replied evenly. "How is he?" "Stable," she said. No thanks to, she caught herself, glancing at her friends. The doctors say he'll recover. I nodded, ignoring the implied accusation. May I see him? She hesitated, then stepped aside. He's resting. I entered the room quietly. My father looked smaller somehow against the white hospital sheets, his face pale but peaceful in sleep. A monitor beeped steadily beside him, tracking his vital signs. I sat in the chair next to his bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Despite everything, seeing him vulnerable like this stirred deep emotions in me. This was the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had cheered at my soccer games, who had once been my hero. When had things changed? When had I shifted from daughter to provider in his eyes? Had I ever truly been just his child, or had I always been viewed as an investment expected to yield returns? As I sat there, lost in thought, his eyes fluttered open. For a moment, he looked confused. Then recognition dawned. Emma, he said, voice raspy. You're here. Yes, Dad. I came as soon as Nate called. He nodded slowly, then glanced toward the door. Your mother told everyone you refused to help with my medical bills. It wasn't what I expected him to say. Not, I'm glad to see you, or thank you for coming. Straight to the narrative, the lie they'd constructed. There were no medical bills, Dad, I said quietly. You asked for money for a condo assessment. He waved a hand weakly. Details. The point is, family should help family. Even now, lying in a hospital bed, he was trying to manipulate me. The realization should have hurt, but instead, it simply confirmed what I already knew. I do help family, Dad. I helped you and Mom for 8 years. I helped Nate with tuition. I showed up today because I care about you, despite everything. He frowned. So you're still refusing to help financially? I met his gaze steadily. I'm building my own financial security now. I can't be your safety net anymore. He looked away, jaw tight. Then why are you here? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. If I wasn't going to provide money, what good was I to him? I'm here because you're my father, and I heard you were ill, I said simply. No other reason. He didn't respond. Just stared at the ceiling. After a few minutes of uncomfortable silence, I stood. I'll come back tomorrow to check on you, I said. The doctors say you should recover fully. As I turned to leave, he spoke again, his voice quieter. The assessment is still due. We'll lose the condo. I paused at the door. You have options, Dad. You could take out a loan. Sell some assets. Ask the condo board for accommodation due to your health situation. None of those are real options, he countered. They're the same options anyone else would have, I replied. Including me. I left the room, closing the door quietly behind me. My mother looked up expectantly. He's awake, I said. We talked. Briefly. She studied my face. Did you work things out? I knew what she was really asking. Had I agreed to give them money? We talked, I repeated. I'll be back tomorrow to check on him. Her expression hardened. After everything we've done for you. It was the refrain I'd heard my entire adult life. After everything we've done for you. As if raising me had been a transaction, an investment. They expected to pay dividends forever. I know what you've done, Mom, I said quietly. Both the good and the bad. I'm grateful for the good. The rest? I'm learning to let go of. I walked away before she could respond, my steps growing steadier with each floor tile that passed beneath my feet. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm on my face, a gentle reminder that there was a whole world beyond the hospital, beyond my parents' demands and disappointments. My phone buzzed with a text from my new employer, confirming my start date. Life was moving forward. And for the first time in years, I was moving with it, not dragging the weight of obligation behind me, but walking freely toward a future of my own making. As I drove home, I thought about the concept of family, what it should be versus what mine had become. True family lifted each other up, supported each other through hard times, celebrated successes without jealousy or expectation. What I had with my parents wasn't family in that sense. It was a business arrangement that had gone sour when I could no longer fulfill my end of a contract I'd never actually signed. But that didn't mean I couldn't have real family connections. In my life, my relationship with Nate was evolving into something healthier. My friendship with Maya and others had deepened since I'd had more emotional energy to invest in them. And Aunt Linda had reached out, offering the kind of supportive family relationship I'd always craved. Family, I was learning, wasn't just about blood. It was about mutual respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. And sometimes, the healthiest thing you could do for yourself was to redefine what family meant to you. I pulled into my apartment complex, mind clearer than it had been in months. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, another hospital visit, likely more guilt and manipulation. But I would face it with newfound strength and clarity. The boundaries I had set weren't walls to keep people out. They were foundations upon which healthier relationships could potentially be built, if my parents were willing. And if they weren't, I would continue building my life without their approval or support. Either way, I would be okay. Better than okay. I would thrive. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital with a small potted plant for my father's room. Not flowers that would wither and die, but something green and living that could grow with proper care. It felt symbolic in a way I couldn't quite articulate. The hospital corridor was quieter today. No church ladies, no whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. Just the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum and the distant beeping of medical equipment. My mother was sitting alone outside my father's room, scrolling through her phone with a furrowed brow. She looked up when I approached, her expression unreadable. "The doctor's with him now," she said before I could ask. "Doing some tests." I nodded and took a seat across from her, placing the plant on the chair beside me. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. "He was up all night," she finally said. "Worrying about the condo." I met her gaze evenly. "The doctors said stress isn't good for his recovery." "Exactly," she replied, leaning forward slightly. "Which is why we need to resolve this situation quickly. For his health." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. Using my father's medical condition to pressure me into financial support. Classic. "Has Dad considered talking to a financial advisor?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "They might have solutions we haven't thought of." My mother's lips thinned. "We don't need a stranger telling us how to manage our affairs." "Professional advice isn't a bad thing, Mom. I consulted with a financial planner after I lost my job. It was incredibly helpful." She waved her hand dismissively. "That's different. You're young. We're at a different stage of life." I let that statement hang in the air, its irony speaking for itself. They were the ones who needed financial guidance, yet they rejected it out of pride. The door to my father's room opened, and a doctor emerged, clipboard in hand. She nodded politely to us. "Mrs. Winters?" "Mr. Winters is doing well. The tests show no significant damage from the TIA. With proper medication and lifestyle changes, he should make a full recovery." My mother stood quickly. "What kind of lifestyle changes?" "Reduced stress, for one," the doctor said, glancing at her notes. "Regular exercise. A heart-healthy diet. And we'll be prescribing blood pressure medication and a statin." "When can he come home?" my mother asked. "We'd like to keep him one more night for observation, but he should be able to go home tomorrow if all remains stable." After the doctor left, my mother turned to me. "You heard her. Reduced stress. How is he supposed to reduce stress when we're about to lose our home?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, there are solutions that don't involve me sending money." "Like what?" she challenged. "You could sell the condo and rent an apartment. Dad could increase his consulting hours. You could get a part-time job. You could look into reverse mortgage options." With each suggestion, my mother's expression grew more closed, more hostile. These were reasonable options, but they all involved changes she didn't want to make. "Those aren't realistic," she said flatly. "They're entirely realistic," I countered. "Millions of people your age work and live within their means. There's no shame in it." "We shouldn't have to struggle at our age," she insisted. "Not when our daughter is perfectly capable of helping." I picked up the potted plant and stood. "I'm going to see Dad now." Inside the room, my father was sitting up in bed, looking better than he had the day before. Some color had returned to his cheeks, and he was watching a golf tournament on the small TV mounted on the wall. "Hey, Dad," I said, setting the plant on his bedside table. "Brought you something." He glanced at the plant, then at me. "Thanks," he said, his tone non-committal. "Your mother fill you in?" "Yes. The doctor says you're doing well." He nodded, attention returning to the TV. "Good enough to worry about being homeless next month." I sighed internally. It seemed we were jumping right back into the same conversation. "Dad, you won't be homeless. You have options." "Easy for you to say," he replied, finally turning off the TV to focus on me. "You're not the one facing eviction at 63. You're not facing eviction. You're facing a financial challenge that requires problem solving." He scoffed. "Problem solving? Is that what they call it now when children abandon their parents?" The accusation stung, but I kept my voice level. "I haven't abandoned you. I'm here right now. I came as soon as I heard you were ill." Being physically present isn't the same as helping, Emma. "There are many ways to help besides sending money," I said. "I'm offering perspective and alternative solutions." He turned away, jaw tight. "What we need is the assessment fee covered. Anything else is just talk." I stayed for another hour, trying to steer the conversation toward neutral topics: his recovery, the golf tournament, Nate's latest project. At school. But my father remained distant, responding with minimal engagement, clearly displeased that I hadn't capitulated to their financial demands. When I left, I felt drained but also resolute. Their tactics, guilt, accusation, emotional manipulation, were so transparent now that I could see them clearly. And seeing them clearly made them lose their power over me. Outside the hospital, I called Nate. "How is he?" he asked when he picked up. "Physically better," I replied. "Emotionally unchanged. Still focused on the condo assessment and my refusal to pay it." Nate sighed. "Yeah, that sounds about right. Mom called me this morning asking if I could take out a student loan to help them." I nearly dropped my phone. "She what?" "Asked if I could get additional student loans and give them the money," he repeated. "Said it was for Dad's recovery." "That's insane," I said, unlocking my car. "Please tell me you said no." "Of course I said no. I'm already going to be paying off my existing loans for years." He paused. "It's strange, you know? Seeing it. From the outside now. How they operate." "What do you mean?" "Just the way they move from one person to the next, looking for whoever will give them what they want. When you cut them off, they came to me. When I said no, they went to Aunt Linda. Now they're back to pressuring you because Dad's in the hospital." It was an astute observation. My parents had a pattern of seeking the path of least resistance, the easiest source of support rather than addressing the root of their financial problems. "They don't want to change," I said, voicing a realization that had been forming for weeks. "They want the world to accommodate them exactly as they are." "Exactly," Nate agreed. "And they've gotten away with it for years because it was easier for everyone to give in than to deal with their reaction when told no." After hanging up, I drove to a small park near my apartment. I needed fresh air and space to think. The afternoon was warm, the park filled with families and dog walkers enjoying the weekend sunshine. I found an empty bench under a large oak tree and sat, watching a group of children playing an elaborate game of tag. Their laughter carried across the grass, uninhibited and joyful. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya: "Lunch tomorrow? New Thai place open downtown." I smiled and replied with a quick yes. It felt good to make plans that weren't centered around crisis or obligation. As I sat there, I thought about the conversation with Nate. My parents' pattern of behavior wasn't new, it had been there all along. What was new was my perspective on it, my ability to see it clearly and choose not to participate. The realization was both liberating and sad. Liberating because I no longer felt responsible for their choices. Sad because it meant accepting that our relationship might never be what I had hoped for. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother: "Your father's blood pressure is elevated again. Doctor says it's from stress. This is on you, Emma." I stared at the message, the familiar wave of guilt rising, then receding as I recognized the manipulation for what it was. My father's health was not on me. It was the result of his choices, his stress response, his refusal to adapt. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I put my phone away and continued watching the children play, their uncomplicated joy a reminder that life could be simpler than my parents had made it. The next day, after a delightful lunch with Maya, I returned to the hospital to check on my father before his discharge. I found him dressed and sitting in a chair, my mother bustling around the room gathering his things. "The nurse is bringing the discharge papers," my father said when he saw me. "Then we can leave this place." "That's good news," I said, genuinely relieved that he was well enough to go home. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to go home to a ticking time bomb," he replied darkly. 30 days until we lose the condo if that assessment isn't paid." I chose not to engage with the implied demand. The doctor mentioned lifestyle changes. "Have they given you a specific plan to follow?" My mother jumped in before he could answer. The social worker brought some pamphlets. Diet, exercise, stress management. She emphasized the last words with a pointed look at me. "That's good," I said, ignoring the implication. "Following those guidelines will be important for recovery." My father snorted. Hard to manage stress when you're facing homelessness. Before I could respond, a nurse entered with a clipboard and medication. "Ready to go home, Mr. Winters? I have your discharge instructions and prescriptions here." As my father went through the discharge process, I stepped into the hallway to give them space. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from my new employer, confirming some details about my start date and requesting new hire paperwork. I smiled, a sense of anticipation building. This new job represented more than just a paycheck, it was a fresh start, an opportunity to build a career on my terms, without the constant drain of supporting my parents. When I returned to the room, my father was in a wheelchair as per hospital policy, ready to leave. My mother stood behind him, purse clutched tightly. I can drive you home, I offered. My mother hesitated, then nodded stiffly. That would be helpful. The drive to their condo was mostly silent. My father stared out the window, occasionally sighing heavily. My mother sat in the back seat, tapping away on her phone. When we arrived, I helped my father inside, making sure he was comfortable in his recliner before stepping back. Do you need anything else? I asked. Groceries? Medications picked up? We need the assessment fee, my father said bluntly. Everything else is secondary. I met his gaze steadily. I can't provide that, Dad. But I can help in other ways while you recover. My mother emerged from the kitchen, arms crossed. If you won't help with what we actually need, then there's not much point in you being here, is there? The dismissal was clear. If I wouldn't give them money, my presence wasn't valued. I'll check in tomorrow, I said, moving toward the door. Call if you need anything. Neither of them responded. As I left, I heard my mother's voice, not quite quiet enough, ungrateful after everything we've done. The familiar words no longer had the power to wound me. They were just echoes of a narrative that had never been true. Driving away from their condo, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and peace. Sadness for what our relationship had become. Or perhaps had always been. Peace because I was no longer allowing their expectations to define my worth. That evening, I received an email from Aunt Linda. Dear Emma, I spoke with your father today after his discharge. He mentioned the condo assessment but didn't ask directly for help, which I found interesting. I think he knows I've seen through the manipulation. I want you to know I'm proud of you for setting boundaries. It takes courage to break unhealthy patterns, especially with parents. Your father and I had a frank conversation about his options. I suggested he look into a part-time job to supplement his consulting income. He wasn't receptive, but I planted the seed. Stay strong, dear. You're doing the right thing. Love, Aunt Linda. Her support meant more than I could express. For so long, I'd felt alone in my struggle with my parents' expectations and demands. Having someone who understood, who validated my perspective, was incredibly affirming. I replied, thanking her for her support and for speaking honestly with my father. Maybe, just maybe, hearing the same message from multiple sources would eventually break through. The next morning, I woke early, feeling lighter than I had in months. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began working on a personal budget spreadsheet. Something I'd always been too drained to focus on while juggling my own expenses and my parents' needs. With my new salary and without the constant drain of supporting my family, I could actually plan for the future. Emergency fund. Retirement savings. Travel fund. Even a down payment for a home of my own someday. It was startling to see the numbers. Laid out clearly, how much I'd been giving away, how little I'd been keeping for myself. No wonder I'd felt like I was treading water all these years. Midway through my calculations, my phone rang. Nate's number. Hey, I answered, still focused. On my spreadsheet. What's up? Emma, his voice was tight. Mom just called me. They got an eviction notice from the condo association. They have 15 days to pay the assessment or vacate. I sat back, processing this. That seems fast. Apparently they were already behind on regular monthly fees, Nate explained. The special assessment was the last straw for the association. That was new information. My parents had never mentioned being behind on regular payments. They'd framed the special assessment as the sole issue. Did they ask you for money again? Not directly, Nate said. Mom just wanted me to know they'll be homeless soon and might need to stay with me temporarily. I nearly choked on my coffee. With you? In your dorm room? Exactly, he said dryly. Totally realistic plan. What did you say? I told her I literally don't have space for them. She hung up on me. Isite. They're escalating because their deadline is approaching. They still think someone will swoop in and save them at the last minute. Will someone? Nate asked quietly. Not me, I said firmly. And it sounds like not you either. Not me, he confirmed. But I feel guilty. I know. That's how they want us to feel. But Nate, they have options. They're choosing not to use them because they'd rather pressure us than take responsibility. After we hung up, I sat with my thoughts for a while. This latest development wasn't surprising, but it did clarify the situation. My parents had been hiding the full extent of their financial troubles, revealing only what served their narrative of needing immediate rescue. They weren't just facing a one-time special assessment. They were chronically mismanaging their finances, likely counting on my support to cover the gaps. The realization strengthened my resolve. Sending money now wouldn't solve the underlying problem. It would just postpone the inevitable while further depleting my resources. Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, my heart skipped a beat. My father stood in the hallway, looking pale but determined. I opened the door slowly. Dad? Should you be out? You just got discharged yesterday. May I come in? He asked, ignoring my question. I stepped aside, letting him enter my apartment. He looked around critically, taking in my modest living room with its second-hand furniture and simple decor. Nice place, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Cozy. Thank you, I replied, choosing to take his words at face value. Can I get you some water or tea? He shook his head, lowering himself carefully onto my couch. I came to talk sense into you, Emma. Face to face. I sat in the armchair across from him, steeling myself. I'm listening. We received an eviction notice today, he began. 15 days to pay or vacate. Nate mentioned that. I'm sorry to hear it. His eyes narrowed slightly at the revelation that Nate and I had already discussed this. Yes, well, the situation is dire. Your mother is beside herself. I understand it's stressful, I said carefully. Have you looked into any of the options we discussed? Those aren't real solutions, he dismissed. We need the assessment paid, plain and simple. And you're here because you want me to pay it, I stated, not a question. Yes, he said bluntly. You have a new job starting soon. Surely you can take out a loan or use credit cards temporarily. I took a deep breath. Dad, I won't do that. Going into debt to solve your financial problems isn't a solution. It's not my financial problems, he snapped. It's a family crisis. One you have the power to solve but are choosing not to. I've been solving your financial problems for 8 years, I said quietly. Over $200,000 worth. It hasn't fixed anything because the issue isn't lack of money. It's how you manage money. His face flushed. So you're just going to let us become homeless? Your own parents? You won't be homeless, I said firmly. You have options. Sell the condo before the eviction. Find an apartment you can actually afford. Take on more consulting work. Mom could get a job. Your mother hasn't worked in years, he protested. And at our age, starting over is impossible. It's not impossible, Dad. It's uncomfortable. There's a difference. He stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. You've changed, he said finally. You used to care about family. I still care, I replied. That's why I'm not enabling behavior that hurts all of us in the long run. He stood abruptly, wincing slightly at the quick movement. I see I've wasted my time coming here. You've made your choice. I have, I acknowledged, rising as well. And I hope you'll make better choices too, Dad. For your own sake. He moved toward the door, then turned back. Your mother was right. You are ungrateful. After everything we sacrificed for you. The words were meant to wound, to trigger the guilt that had controlled me for so long. But they fell flat, no longer able to pierce the armor of self-awareness I'd built. I'm grateful for the good things you gave me, I said simply. And I'm learning to let go of the rest. After he left, I sat back down, emotions swirling. The conversation had been difficult but clarifying. My father had come not to reconnect, not to understand my perspective, but simply to extract money. When that failed, he'd resorted to the same tactics that had always worked before: guilt, obligation, accusation. But I was different now. I could see the manipulation for what it was. And I could choose not to participate. The next morning, I received a text from my mother. Your father's blood pressure is dangerously high after his visit with you. Doctor says he needs complete rest. I hope you're satisfied. I didn't respond. The implied accusation, that my boundaries were harming my father's health, was another manipulation tactic. My father's health was affected by his own choices, his own stress response, his own refusal to adapt to changing circumstances. Later that day, I received an email notification. My parents had tagged me in a Facebook post. With a sense of dread, I opened the app to find a public plea for help. To our friends and family, as many of you know, Robert recently suffered a health crisis that landed him in the hospital. Now, as he struggles to recover, we are facing eviction from our home due to a special assessment we cannot afford. We are reaching out in humility to ask for your support during this difficult time. Any contribution would be deeply appreciated. They had included a link to a fundraising page, along with a photo of my father in his hospital bed. The post had already received dozens of sympathetic comments and several pledges of financial support. Many comments expressed shock that they were in such dire straits, despite having a successful daughter. I closed the app, a strange calm settling over me. This public plea was their last resort, leveraging my father's health situation and social pressure to raise funds and shame me simultaneously. In the past, I would have been mortified, rushing to delete the tags and possibly even giving in to their demands to make the public spectacle go away. Now, I simply untangled myself. From the post without comment and returned to preparing for my new job. My parents had made their choice. They would rather create a public narrative of victimhood than take practical steps to solve their financial problems. That was their right, but I no longer had to participate in the drama. That evening, I met Maya for dinner. As we enjoyed our meal, she asked how things were going with my parents. They've escalated to public fundraising, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Complete with hospital photos and subtle digs at their ungrateful daughter. Maya's eyes widened. That's intense. How are you feeling about it? I considered the question carefully. Oddly peaceful, I admitted. I've done everything I can to help them help themselves. They've chosen a different path. That's their right, but it doesn't have to be my problem anymore. That's incredibly healthy, Maya said, looking impressed. 6 months ago, you would have been a wreck over something like this. She was right. 6 months ago, I would have been consumed by guilt and shame, probably emptying my savings or taking out loans to make the problem go away. The fact that I could now see their behavior clearly and choose not to be manipulated by it represented tremendous growth. I'm learning, I said simply. As we finished our meal, Maya raised her glass in a toast. To boundaries, she said, grinning. And to the new Emma, the one who knows her own worth. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a surge of gratitude for this friendship that expected nothing from me but authenticity. To boundaries, I echoed. And to figuring out who I am when I'm not someone else's ATM, we laughed together. The sound light and freeing in the warm restaurant air. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, I was becoming the author of my own story, not a supporting character in someone else's drama. And despite the difficulties, despite the painful conversations and broken expectations, that felt like something worth celebrating. 3 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of Novice Technologies, straightening my blazer one last time before heading to the elevator. It was my first day at my new job, and despite the ongoing situation with my parents, I felt a sense of excitement and possibility. The offices were modern and bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering sweeping views of the city. As I was led through the open workspace to my new desk, several people looked up with friendly smiles. Emma, welcome to Novice, said Diane, the HR director who had hired me. We're thrilled to have you joining the team. My desk was by a window, with a small potted succulent waiting for me, a welcome gift from the company. I set down my bag and took in the moment. This wasn't just a new job, it was a symbol of my fresh start. The morning flew by in a whirlwind of introductions, paperwork, and setting up my workstation. By lunchtime, I was already deep in conversation with 2 of my new teammates about the project I'd be working on, a mobile app designed to help people track and improve their financial habits. The irony isn't lost on me, I said with a smile, as we discussed the app's features over lunch. Helping others manage their finances when my own family struggles with it. Sometimes our greatest insights come from our challenges, replied Aiden, the UX designer on the project. You probably understand the emotional side of financial decisions better than most. His words struck me. I had spent years watching my parents make poor financial choices driven by emotion, fear of downsizing, embarrassment about working past retirement age, reluctance to change their lifestyle. That experience could actually be valuable in designing an app that addressed not just the practical aspects of money management but the psychological ones as well. You're right, I said thoughtfully. I never considered that perspective. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but exhilarated. The work was challenging and meaningful, my colleagues were supportive, and for the first time in my professional life, I wasn't constantly calculating how much of my paycheck would go to my parents. As I unlocked the door to my apartment that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Nate. How was day 1 at the new job? I smiled and replied, great. Challenging but exciting. How are classes? Good. Hey, did you see Mom's latest Facebook update? My stomach tightened. No. Do I want to? Probably not, but you should know. They raised enough through the fundraiser to cover the assessment. They're staying in the condo. I sat down on my couch, processing this information. My parents had successfully leveraged their social network and my father's health crisis to raise the funds they needed. Part of me was relieved they wouldn't be evicted. Another part recognized that this solution hadn't addressed their underlying financial issues. Good that they're not being evicted, I texted back. But it's a temporary fix. I know, Nate replied. Dad's talking about it like it's a miracle that proves they were right all along. Of course he was. My father would see this as validation of his approach, create a crisis, appeal for help, receive rescue. The cycle would continue. How are you feeling about it? I asked Nate. There was a long pause before his reply came through. Conflicted. Relieved they're not homeless. Frustrated they're learning the wrong lesson from this. Exactly how I feel, I responded. Later that evening, as I was preparing for bed, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Emma? It's your father. His voice was unfamiliar, lighter somehow, almost jovial. This was his victory voice, the tone he used when things were going his way. Hi, Dad. How are you feeling? Much better, he said. The community really came through for us. We raised more than enough for the assessment. People can be so generous when they see a need. The implication was clear, unlike me, others had stepped up to help. I'm glad you won't be evicted, I said sincerely. Yes, well, we wanted you to know. He paused. Some people suggested we use the extra funds to take a small vacation. Your mother's been under so much stress with my health situation. The doctor says it would be good for both of us. I nearly dropped the phone. They had raised money specifically to avoid losing their home, and now they were considering using the surplus for a vacation? Dad, I said carefully, don't you think it would be better to save any extra funds? In case of future assessments or emergencies? He made a dismissive sound. We deserve a break after everything we've been through. The fundraiser specifically mentioned my recovery. I bit back my instinctive response. This was no longer my problem to solve. My parents would make their choices, and I would make mine. I hope you feel better soon, I said instead. I need to get some sleep now. First week at the new job. Right, the new job, he said, as if just remembering. Well, good luck with that. Not a single question about what I was doing, how I liked it, or even what company I was working for. The conversation, like so many before it, centered entirely on their situation. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, processing the call. In the past, I would have been furious about their plan to use crisis funds for a vacation. I would have lectured, pleaded, maybe even offered to hold the extra money for them, just in case. But now, I simply acknowledged the reality: my parents were who they were. They would continue to make the same choices they had always made. The difference was that I no longer had to be emotionally or financially entangled in those choices. I slept soundly that night, and woke refreshed and ready for my second day at Novice. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a rhythm at my new job. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and I found myself contributing ideas that my colleagues valued. My experience with my parents' financial struggles actually informed some of the app's features, particularly those designed to help users recognize and overcome emotional spending triggers. My personal life began to flourish as well. With more emotional energy available, I rekindled old friendships and even joined a hiking group that met on weekends. For the first time in years, I was investing in my own happiness rather than pouring all my resources into my parents' bottomless needs. One Saturday morning, as I was preparing for a hike, my phone rang. My mother's number. We hadn't spoken since my father's call about the fundraiser 3 weeks earlier. Hello? Emma, her voice was tight. Have you seen the email? What email? From the family attorney. About Grandma's trust. My grandmother, my father's mother, had passed away 5 years ago. She had left a modest trust that was to be divided among her grandchildren when the youngest turned 25. Nate had recently reached that milestone. No, I haven't received anything, I said, checking my inbox as I spoke. Well, you should be getting it soon. The trust is being distributed next month. She paused. We wanted to discuss it with you. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Discuss what, exactly? Your father and I think it would be appropriate for you to share your portion with us, given our situation. After all, we supported you for years, and now we're in our retirement with ongoing medical expenses. I sat down slowly. Mom, that trust is from Dad's mother to her grandchildren. It has nothing to do with you. Family resources should be shared with those in need, she countered. And right now, we're in need. The audacity was breathtaking. After everything that had happened, they were now trying to claim a portion of my inheritance. The trust was Grandma's decision about her money, I said firmly. I'll honor her wishes by accepting what she left to me. So selfish, my mother snapped. After everything we've done for you. Mom, I sent you over $200,000 over 8 years. I've more than repaid any financial support you gave me as an adult. That's not the point. That's exactly the point, I said quietly. This isn't about need. It's about entitlement. You feel entitled to any money I have access to, regardless of its source. She was silent for a moment. Your father will be very disappointed. I'm sure he will, I acknowledged. But this is my inheritance from my grandmother, and I'll use it as I see fit. After we hung up, I sat quietly, letting the waves of anger and frustration wash over me without taking control. Their attempt to claim my inheritance was outrageous but not surprising. It was simply another manifestation of the dynamic that had defined our relationship for years. I took a deep breath and grabbed my hiking backpack. I wouldn't let their demands ruin my day or derail my plans. I had worked too hard to reclaim my life. The hike was exactly what I needed: fresh air, physical exertion, and the company of people who expected nothing from me but conversation and camaraderie. As we reached the summit of the trail, looking out over the city spread below us, I felt a profound sense of perspective. My parents' drama, which had once consumed my entire worldview, now seemed smaller, more contained, just one aspect of my life rather than its defining feature. That evening, I checked my email and found the message from the trust attorney. My grandmother had left me $42,000, not a life-changing amount, but significant enough to make a difference in my financial security. I thought carefully about how to use this unexpected gift. After years of depleting my savings to support my parents, this was an opportunity to strengthen my own financial foundation. I decided to put most of it toward retirement savings and an emergency fund, with a small portion set aside for a modest vacation, my first in years. As I was making these plans, a text arrived from Nate. "Did Mom call you about Grandma's trust?" "Yes," I replied. "They want me to give them my portion." "Same here. Called it a family obligation." "What did you say?" I asked. "That I'm still in school with loans to repay." They didn't take it well. I smiled grimly. They didn't take my refusal well either. "We're breaking the pattern," Nate texted. "It's hard but necessary." His words resonated deeply. We were indeed breaking a generational pattern, one in which my parents had been taught that family meant unconditional financial support without accountability or reciprocity. 2 days later, I received an email from my father. The subject line read simply, "Disappointed." I opened it with a sense of déjà vu. "Emma, your refusal to share your inheritance has confirmed what your mother and I have long suspected: you no longer consider yourself part of this family. Despite everything we've sacrificed for you, you continue to withhold support when we need it most. The trust money would have helped secure our retirement and covered ongoing medical expenses related to my heart condition. Instead, you're selfishly keeping it for yourself. If this is your final decision, please don't contact us again. We cannot continue to subject ourselves to such treatment from our own daughter." Dad, the ultimatum was clear: give them money or be cut off from the family. In the past, such a threat would have devastated me. Now, I recognized it for what it was: a last-ditch manipulation tactic from people who had run out of other options. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took the email to my weekly therapy session, a practice I had started shortly after setting boundaries with my parents. My therapist, Dr. Chen, had been instrumental in helping me understand the dynamics at play and strengthen my resolve. "What do you think they expect to happen?" Dr. Chen asked after reading the email. "They expect me to cave," I said. "To be so afraid of losing my family that I'll give them what they want." "And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully. "Sad. Not because I'm tempted to give in, but because this confirms that our relationship has always been transactional for them. They're literally putting a price tag on having me in their lives." Dr. Chen nodded. "And that price is your inheritance?" "Yes. But also my autonomy. My right to make my own financial decisions. My future security." I paused. "It's not really about the money. It's about control." "What would a healthy response to this email look like for you?" she asked. I thought about it. I think no response is actually the healthiest option. Engaging would just continue the cycle. They've made their position clear. Now I need to honor my own boundaries. That evening, I drafted a brief email to the trust attorney, confirming my acceptance of the inheritance and providing my banking details. Then I blocked my parents' email addresses and phone numbers. It wasn't an angry action. It wasn't even a sad one. It was simply a necessary step to protect my peace and well-being. They had made their choice, establishing conditions I couldn't and wouldn't meet. I was making mine. The following weekend, I met Aunt Linda for coffee. She had become an unexpected source of support and wisdom during this difficult time. "I'm sure he is," I replied, stirring my latte. "He and Mom gave me an ultimatum: either give them my inheritance or don't contact them again." Aunt Linda shook her head. "So predictable. Your grandfather left your father money when he turned 30. Do you know what he did with it?" "No idea," I admitted. "Bought a boat," she said with a wry smile. "A boat he used maybe 3 times before selling it at a loss a year later. Your grandfather was furious. He'd hoped your father would use it for a down payment on a house." "History repeats itself," I murmured. "Not always," Aunt Linda said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You're breaking the cycle, Emma. It takes enormous courage to do what you're doing." "Sometimes it doesn't feel like courage," I admitted. It feels like selfishness. That's because you were raised to believe that taking care of yourself was selfish. It's not. It's necessary. She sat back, studying me. You look better, you know. Less burdened. I smiled. I feel better. My new job is going well. I'm making friends. I'm even dating a little. Tell me about the job, she encouraged. As I described my work at Novice, particularly the financial wellness app we were developing, Aunt Linda listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. She didn't once mention my parents or the ongoing situation with them. For that hour, I was just Emma, not a daughter who had failed to meet expectations, not a bank account with legs, just a young woman excited about her career and life. After we parted, I walked through the park, enjoying the early summer warmth. Children played on the swings, couples strolled hand in hand, elderly people sat on benches feeding pigeons. Normal life, continuing all around me. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Emma, it's Mom. Using Nancy's phone. Since you blocked mine. We need to talk about your decision. Call me. I stared at the message, a familiar knot forming in my stomach. They had found a way around my boundary, as I should have expected they would. The question was, what would I do about it? In the past, I would have called immediately, apologetic and anxious to smooth things over. The old Emma would have been devastated by the thought of being cut off from family, willing to pay any price to maintain the connection. But I wasn't that person anymore. I blocked the new number without responding and continued my walk. By the time I reached home, I had 3 more texts from different numbers, all my mother, attempting to reach me through friends' phones. I blocked each one without reading the full messages. The pattern was clear, they would use any means to breach the boundaries I had established. That evening, I received an email from Nate. Just a heads up, Mom and Dad are telling everyone you've had some kind of breakdown. They're saying you've turned against the family and might need an intervention. Aunt Linda is pushing back. Hard, telling people the truth, but I thought you should know what they're saying. I sighed, not surprised but still disheartened. This was their new tactic. If they couldn't control me through guilt or obligation, they would try to control the narrative about me. Thanks for letting me know, I wrote back. Are they pressuring you about your portion of the trust too? Constantly, he replied. But I'm holding firm. Watching you stand your ground has helped me do the same. His words touched me deeply. By setting healthy boundaries for myself, I was modeling behavior that helped my brother do the same. Perhaps that was the most meaningful outcome of this difficult journey, breaking a cycle that might otherwise have continued to the next generation. The next day at work, I threw myself into the financial wellness app project with renewed energy. The feature I was most passionate about was a module that helped users identify emotional spending triggers and family money patterns. It included educational content about financial boundaries and resources for handling family pressure around money. This is really good, said Aidan during our team review. It addresses something most financial apps ignore, the emotional and familial aspects of money management. Thanks, I said. It's based on personal experience. Sometimes our challenges become our superpowers, he replied with a smile. That evening, as I was cooking dinner, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I checked the peephole, my heart sank. My parents stood in the hallway. For a moment, I considered not answering. But they knew I was home, my car was in the parking lot, lights were on in my apartment. They would probably keep ringing, maybe even make a scene in the hallway. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door but remained standing in the doorway, not inviting them in. Emma, my mother said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We've been trying to reach you. I blocked your numbers, I said calmly. That wasn't an oversight. We're your parents, my father interjected. You can't just cut us off. Actually, I can. You gave me an ultimatum, give you my inheritance or don't contact you again. I made my choice. My mother's expression hardened. We're family. Family helps family. Family doesn't extort money with threats of estrangement, I countered. Family doesn't make love conditional on financial support. After everything we've done for you, my father began, his face flushing. I held up a hand. Please don't. I've heard that line my entire adult life, and it doesn't work anymore. You raised me. I am grateful for that. But that doesn't entitle you to control my finances or my life. We just need help, my mother said, her voice taking on the plaintive tone she used when trying to evoke sympathy. Your father's medical bills are covered by Medicare and the supplemental insurance you purchased with the fundraiser money, I finished for her. Nate told me. My father's eyes narrowed at the mention of my brother. He's being just as difficult. Must have learned it from you. Or maybe we've both finally recognized an unhealthy pattern, I suggested. Look, I'm not going to stand here arguing in the hallway. I've made my decision about the inheritance. It's final. Then you're no longer our daughter, my father. declared dramatically. If that money means more to you than family. The words were meant to devastate me, to make me crumble and give in. But instead, I felt an odd sense of peace. That's your choice, I said quietly. But I hope someday you'll realize that real family doesn't put price tags on relationships. I closed the door gently but firmly, then leaned against it, listening to their muffled voices in the hallway. After a few minutes, their footsteps receded toward the elevator. I returned to my kitchen, hands steady as I resumed chopping vegetables for my dinner. The conversation had been difficult, but I had maintained my boundaries with clarity and calm. As I cooked, I thought about the concept of family, what it should be versus what mine had become. True family supported each other's growth and independence. True family celebrated successes without jealousy or entitlement. True family loved without conditions or price tags. My parents had shown me, through their words and actions, that they were incapable of that kind of relationship. It was painful to accept, but also liberating. I was no longer chasing an impossible ideal or trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, a sense of hard-won peace settling over me. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Dinner tomorrow? The new Italian place on 4th? I smiled and replied, absolutely. Can't wait. My life was moving forward, not despite setting boundaries with my parents, but because of it. The energy and resources I had once poured into trying to satisfy their insatiable demands were now directed toward building meaningful relationships, advancing my career, and caring for my own well-being. The inheritance from my grandmother would help secure my financial future, exactly as she had intended. The irony wasn't lost on me. By respecting her wishes rather than surrendering to my parents' demands, I was honoring family in the truest sense. As darkness fell and city lights began to twinkle in the distance, I made a silent promise to myself, to build a life defined by authentic connections rather than obligation, by mutual respect rather than control, by joy rather than guilt. My parents had abandoned me when I lost my job, showing that their love was conditional on what I could provide. I had walked away when they lost everything, not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation and the recognition that enabling them would only perpetuate harmful patterns. Breaking free hadn't been easy. It had required courage, therapy, support from unexpected allies, and a willingness to face painful truths. But standing on the other side, I could finally see that it had been worth every difficult moment. I wasn't just surviving now. I was thriving. And that was the most powerful response I could have given to those who had tried to define my worth by what I could give rather than who I was. The journey wasn't over. There would be more difficult days ahead, more attempts at manipulation, more painful realizations. But I was stronger now, clearer about my boundaries, committed to my own well-being in a way I had never been before. And that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.